In this lecture, we'll discuss the Internet and digital media. Specifically, we'll briefly discuss the history and structure of the Internet, as well as current issues facing its growth and use, such as bandwidth, the digital divide, and net neutrality. This lecture will contain some review questions as well. As before, you can pause the slides at any time to slow the video. The Internet is such a powerful player in our everyday lives that it's easy to assume it's always been around, but it's quite new in the grand scheme of things. The Internet started as a tool for national defense out of a need to allow computer scientists and researchers to share computer processing time. Basically, the Defense Department didn't want to buy computers for every university that was doing research for them, so what they did is they set up phone lines to connect smaller universities to big mainframe computers, and thus created this network of computers. At that time, in the 1960s, computers were the size of small houses and very few people had access to them. Bob Taylor, who worked for the Defense Department, was the visionary who came up with the idea of how the Internet is now. The Internet is a global network of computers, a vast superhighway of computer connections that cover the world. The first networks were centralized, all going back to one computer, meaning that just one central nerve center or server that everyone connected to. In that case, if the central server were knocked out, there would be no way for the individual computers on the network to communicate with each other because they were all going through that one central computer. Because of that concern that a technical failure or even war could take out an entire network by targeting that single nerve center, networks like the Defense Department's ARPANET were developed. ARPA, Advanced Research Projects Administration, net meaning network. That was the Internet before it became the Internet. They were operated on this distributed network rather than the centralized one. That way, you have no central nerve center. If you knock out one node, it doesn't shut down communications across the network. In a distributed network, it also makes it more difficult for one organization to assert too much control over the entire system. Because of this, no individual organization or government owns the Internet. A lot of the backbone for the Internet is controlled by the National Science Foundation, by the United States companies and infrastructure, but they don't have any direct control over it. And if the United States disappeared, the Internet would live on because it's that global network of computer. So distributed networks were the forerunner of what we see today as the Internet. Most of the time what we think of as the Internet is only a small part of it. There's many parts to the Internet. When we navigate to a special web page, such as ius.edu, we're only operating on one part of the Internet called the World Wide Web. The World Wide Web was first introduced in 1991. He actually started working on it in the late 80s over at CERN. It was created by Sir Tim Berners-Lee. He was working at CERN, that Switzerland physics particle laboratory that has a super collider that might create a black hole someday and destroy us all. But he was working there, and they gave their scientists time, like one day a week, to work on their own projects. So Sir Tim did that. And since then, the web has exploded. When we think of searching the Internet, maybe through Google, we're really searching the web. And that's just the visible part of the web. In this slide, you see where it says surface web with Google, Wikipedia, Bing, and such. The visible web, or what search engines like Google can see, is estimated at about 50 billion pages. The invisible web is estimated to perhaps be 1,000 times larger than the visible web. So can you imagine that? I mean, 50 billion pages that we can see by doing a Google search, but 1,000 times larger is this invisible web we can't access through a Google search. But no one really knows for sure. The invisible web includes pages that might be on a password protected site like Facebook or even Canvas. Search engines can see part of them, but not most of them. So search engines can only see part of the web, which is much larger. And that's not even talking about the dark web, if it's even a real part of the web. The dark web would be places that there's even no front door for those sites. So if you want a place to illegally traffic drugs or send out illegal information, that's the dark web. It would be someplace that the search engines can't get to. It doesn't exist on any service that you can get through to the dark web. So a little bit deeper than the deep web, which kind of has a front door like financial records. You go to the bank, but you can't get in any further without a password. Or even with Canvas, you can't get to a student's grade without a certain password. So there's a lot out there that we can't see. And larger still is the broad internet, which includes other technologies like instant messaging, video chatting, video game playing, and much more. So you can see with this little graphic here, you see everything started back in May of 1969 with the ARPANET, and has grown not only because of computer growth, but also growth of different technologies using the internet. So you can see in the slide that in the 1990s, the World Wide Web took over, and then there's a lot of things on top of the World Wide Web. And the World Wide Web is on top of the internet, this global network of computers. So when you say you're using the internet and you're just using Google and Facebook, you're only using the web. If you're actually using the whole internet, it could be anything from instant messaging to playing video games. So, all right, in the next few slides, we'll include some questions that you can answer to help summarize some of the material we just covered. If you need more time to answer these questions, just pause the video. So, review question 1, true or false? The U.S. Defense Department was heavily involved in the project that would become the internet. Review question 2. What kind of network is this? That picture that's on the right hand side. Is it a centralized network, distributed network, interwebbed network, or a node network? Review question 3. True or false? All web pages on the World Wide Web are indexed by Google servers. The internet is big and houses a lot of useful information. As the internet has become and continues to become a repository of information used by the public, there's increased concern about those who do not have access or even the skills necessary to fully use these new tools. This inequality is often referred to as the digital divide. It means that as technology gets more advanced, those who have access to it can learn more and do more. Those without the technology are left behind. And if you can see here on our chart, the digital divide, you can see that there are some states that are well connected, especially on the west coast here, and then there are some states that aren't very well connected, and you can see it's a lot of the south and the Midwest here, and that includes Kentucky. And you can see this is from the Census Bureau 2015. According to a Congressional Research Service report in 2012, and I try to find updated information, this is the best we have, about 38% of households nationwide have internet access with speeds greater than 3 megabytes per second. Kentucky was at the national average, and Indiana was a little bit better at that time in 2012 at 41%, and this has increased lately. Even where there is access, many may find the cost prohibitive. As many places, high-speed access is at least $40 to $50 a month. The problem gets worse when there's little competition. The map in front of you is of Indiana, and this was done right as the schools started shutting down in March and April of 2020 because of COVID. And you can see that there's a problem with doing schools just online, because there are some households that just do not have either computers or high-speed internet connection. Some schools are supplying computers, some services are going and wiring people who don't have internet or giving away internet for free during this time. But you can see that places with, well, I like to say the bigger cities, but that's not true. Percentage of households with children and no internet connections, you can see that includes Floyd County, Clark County being somewhere between 11.6% and 20.2%. So you're saying like almost a quarter of the students just do not have that technology, and creates what we are calling here the digital divide. Most in this class live in southern Indiana or Kentucky, and there are many areas within this region that are underserved by any high-speed provider. Many more areas have only one or two providers, which means prices may be higher in areas where there isn't competition. Beyond high-speed internet access, another problem is that there is increased demand for higher speeds from users. The companies that provide the internet service are increasingly wanting to limit how those services can be used. This has to do with something called bandwidth. Bandwidth is a term that says how much information can go through the wires that connect you to the internet, or how fast the information can go to your router, to your Wi-Fi, and then your Wi-Fi back to your router, back to the wires that connect the internet together. You can think about this kind of like a water running through your pipes in your house. If you have a big pipe coming to your house, you're going to get more water coming in, and if all the faucets are open, everyone's still going to have good water pressure. But if you have a small little pipe coming into your house, even turning on one spigot, you don't have a lot of water pressure. When you start turning on other spigots, it slows down even more. And with how some internet service providers wire areas together, the more people in your neighborhood that use the same service slows down the service also. So just imagine having not a lot of water pressure. Everyone's using the sink, using that tub, flushing the toilet, and then you try to turn on the sink, you're not going to get much water pressure. Same thing if you have really good internet access, but your TV is working off the internet, someone's watching YouTube, 3 people who are using the Wi-Fi on their smartphones, and then you try to send email to your professor. Yeah, it's going to be slow. It's going to take a little bit of time, and it's not the service provider who's at fault here. It's the person that's has all the water spigots open. So that's bandwidth. This has caused a discussion of the concept of net neutrality, which means that all data on the internet should be treated the same, without prioritizing some data over other. Today, some services are bandwidth hogs, like Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, or Pandora. Because of that increased bandwidth use and relatively limited space, some internet service providers are opponents of net neutrality and say they should be able to prioritize bandwidth for certain services or charge more to people who want to use more bandwidth or for non-prioritized services. So in other words, without net neutrality, a internet service provider can let AT&T have more of that bandwidth, a larger pipe, whereas regular users, everyone else in this graphic here, would have a very small pipe going into our house. And that's the state we're in right now. It's 2020, so we do not have net neutrality. And yeah, AT&T, if they see that you're using a lot of bandwidth for YouTube, they can slow you down. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can complain to the FCC, and how the FCC is set up, there's 5 members of the board. 2 are Republican, 2 are Democrat, and the chair is appointed by the president. So he goes whichever party the president's with. So with an election coming up in 2020, it should be interesting to see if net neutrality goes back to being neutral from what it is today. Other companies argue they should treat all data the same, that they should be neutral. They argue that if we let companies choose certain data, we run the rest of the internet, run the risk of the rest of the internet not being as open, and thus lessening the marketplace of ideas as it might otherwise be. So right now on this cartoon, we're on the lower part. If you want extra, you want more bandwidth, you want more, a bigger pipe, so to speak, you're going to have to pay for it. And if you don't want them to throttle back at night, who throttles back at night? Indiana University. Things will go slower if you're on campus because they do throttle back when offices aren't open. So the students have the power. They can vote with their voices, and also make it known. Use the internet. Let's discuss the internet and democracy. The internet has often been regarded as a place where democracy and the marketplace of ideas can be fully realized. One of the videos you'll watch this week is from Clay Shirky, an internet expert who argues that social media like Facebook and Twitter have the potential to change the world. Shirky argues that we are in a communication revolution. The internet makes it so easy for so many people to communicate with so many other people. Some might call this the end of mass communication, at least how we know it, with the biggest media organizations and government no longer in control of the messages. But on the other hand, you can watch the 2019 documentary The Social Dilemma on Netflix, who asks if this social revolution is evil. As you watch the Shirky video, think about the examples he gives. Think about the question, has the internet caused or will cause a revolution, especially how we think about communications and democracy? If you can, also watch The Social Dilemma, and just to see how eye-opening the point of view that documentary has. All documentaries have a point of view. The Social Dilemma has a point of view, and how closely we are watched and how we're being bought and sold by social media might be eye-opening to some, but you have to watch the Shirky video. You don't have to watch The Social Dilemma, because you may not have Netflix, or may have quit Netflix recently due to other controversies. And that's why I wish we had face-to-face class, because we could talk about these other controversies. But let's have a few more review questions before we end this lecture. Review question 4. What is the digital divide? Is it the inequity that develops between higher and lower social economic positions as the higher class get increased access to technology and the internet? Or a problem that no longer exists because broadband usage is up by 95% or none of the above? Review question 5. What is net neutrality? The way to increase the speed of Netflix, or a law that requires all online journalism to be balanced and neutral, or a way to prevent internet companies from limiting bandwidth to data? Alright, thank you for watching this, and remember, these videos are always around for review if you need to see them again. Thank you.